This is the oral presentation that goes with my critically examine and discuss 2 ways in which human rights in everyday practice can be protected and maintained in Australia. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional landowners of this land. We're going to look specifically at occupational health and safety in the workplace, and we're going to run through the definitions of occupational health and safety retrieved from Wikipedia and the definition of a whistleblower retrieved from Wikipedia. Occupational health should aim at the promotion and maintenance of the highest degree of physical, mental and social well-being of workers in all occupations, the prevention amongst workers and departures from health caused by their working conditions, the protection of workers in their employment from risks resulting from factors adverse to health, the placing and maintenance of the worker in an occupational environment adapted to his physiological and psychological capabilities, and to summarise, the adaptation of work to man and of each man to his job. Now on to whistleblower. Most whistleblowers are internal whistleblowers who report misconduct on a fellow employee or superior within their company. One of the most interesting questions with respect to internal whistleblowers is why and under what circumstances people will either act on the internal reason to stop illegal and otherwise unacceptable behaviour or report it. There is some reason to believe that people are more likely to take action with respect to unacceptable behaviour within an organisation if there are complaint systems that offer not just options dictated by the planning and control organisation, but a choice of options for individuals, including an option that offers near absolute confidentiality. As we look further into this topic, we'll see that these are intrinsically linked. We're going to look at what is the fundamental importance of OH&S in the modern workplace, what happens when people's work conditions do not match their understanding of best practice, and what happens to people who report instances of issues in the workplace to members of the public outside their businesses. What is the fundamental importance of OH&S in the modern workplace? Employers are protected from potentially harmful environments through their employer creating a safe, both physically and emotionally, environment for them. Employers are protected from potentially harmful repercussions, such as lawsuits, by implementing policies and procedures that promote a safe environment for their staff. We're looking here at the link between the way employees see their workplaces and the way employees need to set up environments within the workplace that promote and maintain human rights within the workplace. When we're looking at workplaces in Australia, it's important to note that the workplace legislation in Australia and OH&S legislation in Australia only protects the public sector. This leads us to look at what are the key factors for creating an internal OH&S policy. Obviously, if you're in a private business, it's going to be much more extensive than the public sector due to the fact that the public sector has its own set of laws that governing OH&S. Internal factors such as individual behaviour, psychosocial, organisation and contextual factors, Baker, Israel and Sherman, 1996, and external factors such as overlapping social, including living conditions, psychological, physical and chemical hazards confronting each occupation, Ball, Quinlan, 1991. Here we talk about the fact that while there needs to be an overreaching OH&S strategy in an organisation, we need to look carefully at each department and target the individual needs of the workers. People in a chemical plant may be working in administration or may be working in the biohazard floor. So obviously each of these are going to have both an overreaching need for the banner information, an OH&S policy that governs their work environment, but also more poignant parts of that OH&S strategy which pertain directly to their work situation. Susan Sherman says, within a single firm, it's common to find both occupational health and safety and health and worksite health promotion interventions operating in isolation from each other, with different intervention methods, targets and personnel. Overcoming this segmentation of the two fields will require, among other things, the promulgation of an overarching model of work and health. Here we're going to talk about what the government does to help. The Australian government offers online resources aimed at assisting the general business community in its pursuit to create OH&S policy. This policy also seeks to protect workers who wish to challenge practices that they feel sit outside the fair and safe work conditions. There's an online checklist that you can draw from, which talks about OH&S policies and what you should do when you're writing a policy, what it should include. A strong statement of the organisation's attitude to discrimination and harassment, a clearly worded definition of discrimination and harassment, a statement that discrimination and harassment can, on any of the grounds listed in the legislation, is against the law, circumstances where discrimination and harassment can occur, a statement that everyone has a responsibility to prevent workplace harassment and discrimination, information on how and where to seek help if discrimination or harassment occurs, the likely consequence of unlawful discrimination. Now, Stuart Dawson, 2000, says it's noteworthy that the Australian Acts focus on whistleblowing by the public sector, as I mentioned before. For example, the Queensland Whistleblower Protection Act, I'm quoting here, provides special protection in the public interest to disclosures about unlawful, negligent or proper public sector conduct. The same thing in New South Wales and the same thing in the ACT. Well, now we'll move on from OH&S directly into that link with what happens when the system fails. Most whistleblowers went outside their organisation only after it began to cover up the wrongdoing and intensify its retaliation against the employee. That's a Rothschild and Mythe 1999 quote. Employers are forced to deal with external powers addressing the issues of these employees. We'll look at the personal consequences of whistleblowing. We're looking at another Dawson study here where he talks about the fact that whistleblowing consequences are typically severe. Of 223 whistleblowers in this study, 90% lost their jobs or were demoted, 20% faced lawsuits, 26% faced psychiatric or medical referral, 25% admitted alcohol abuse, 17% lost their homes, 15% were subsequently divorced, 10% attempted suicide, and 8% went bankrupt. This is cited from Dempster 1997. Recognition of these types of consequences and that at least some whistleblowing is motivated by a legitimate concern for public interest led the consideration of the legislative protection for whistleblowers. So this is from his whistleblowing broad definition and some issues for Australia. Now we're looking at a cartoon. This harks back to that old children's story, The Emperor's New Clothes. It's quite a funny story where a tailor comes into town, panders to the boss's ego, to the emperor's ego, and says, I'm going to create you new clothes. What he does is create nothing except the aura of and the mystique of having created this new set of clothes. All of the townspeople are so worried about their livelihoods and their lives that they won't say anything to the emperor. And there we see the person talking to the guard about the fact that he's seen it and the guard saying that he's going to get into trouble and he shouldn't have pointed it out. Now we go into the link between effective OH&S policy in the Australian workplace. It may lead to the Australian worker having their human rights protected by best practices followed to the letter every day in their workplace. This would then lead on to the need to whistleblow being made redundant, should this be a successful part of the business and organisational structure. What we're talking about here is using OH&S policy, managing OH&S policy to make a positive impact on the human rights of individuals every day in Australia. Thank you.